Welcome to the new session on philosophy of Kant. In this session, we are dealing with analytic of principles, distinction between phenomena and noumena, transcendental doctrine of method. Let us see what is analytic of principles. The analytic of principles, which Kant also calls the transcendental doctrine of judgment, is a doctrine showing how pure concepts of understanding which are a priori apply to external appearances. For Kant, judgment is the faculty of applying rules, that is, of settling whether something falls under a given rule or not. Kant says that such principles are rules for applying the a priori categories to external sensations are also a priori. His argument is simple. The 12 categories of understanding or the concepts of understanding are a priori. Hence, rules for their application to the external world also have to be a priori. The analytic of principles has two parts. First deals with the schematicism of pure understanding. The second deals with the principles of pure understanding, that is, the synthetic judgments that flow a priori from pure concepts of the understanding. Now, let us see what is schematicism. If a category is to be applied to an appearance, there has to be some third thing that is like the category on the one hand and like the appearance on the other. This mediating representation must be pure, containing nothing empirical. It has to be intellectual on the one hand and sensible on the other hand. Such a representation Kant's called transcendental schema. They are a priori formal conditions of sensibility. If a category is to be applied to an object, the schema has to be satisfied. What the understanding does with these schemas Kant calls the schematicism of the pure understanding. The schema is in itself always only a product of the imagination. In fact, it is the schemas, not images of objects, that underlie our pure sensible concepts. For example, we have different type of triangles. None of them would be suitable for the general concept of a triangle in the mind. The schema of the triangle can't exist anywhere but in thought. It is a rule of the synthesis of the imagination with regard to pure shapes in space. This schematicism of our understanding in its application to appearances and their mere form is an art concealed in the depths of the human soul, says Kant. After explaining schema, he enlists and explains different schemas. For example, the pure schema of magnitude as a concept of understanding is number, which is a representation that comprises the successive addition of similar units to one another. Then he proceeds to explain the schema of substance, causality, community, possibility, actuality, necessity, etc. The schematicism of understanding amounts to the unity of all the manifold of intuition in inner sense. The schema is thus phenomenon of object in agreement with the a priori categories. What is in disagreement cannot be understood. Thus, although the schema of sensibility helps categories, they also restrict the categorist. Now, let us see what are the principles of pure understanding. The principles of pure understanding are rules for the objective use of the 12 categories. Just remind you, the 12 categories are: first one quantity, divisions, unity, plurality, totality. Second one quality, divisions, reality, negation, limitation. Third one relation, subdivision, inherence and subsistence, causality and dependence and community. Fourth one modality, divisions, possibility, impossibility, existence, non-existence, necessity, contingency. They are the basic principles which are to be satisfied if an external object is to be known by the categories. Therefore, Kant says that the table of categories is the natural guide in constructing the table of principles. He constructs a table of the principles of pure understanding as follows: 1. Axioms of induction, 2nd. Anticipations of perception, 3rd one analogies of experience, 4th one postulates of empirical thoughts as such. First one, axioms of induction. It is the principles that all inductions are extensive magnitudes. All appearances contain an induction in space and time. Now, space and time is something for which there is a quantity or amount of time and amount of space, which Kant calls magnitude. It follows that an object can't be perceived as an appearance unless one brings the concept of a magnitude to bear on it. Kant calls a magnitude extensive when a whole is made possible by the representation of parts, that is, when the parts precede the whole. He adds that geometry is based on this principle. Second one, anticipation of perception. It is the principle that any external object of sensation has intensive magnitude, that is a degree. If an external object is red in color, it has some degree of redness in it which can be further reduced. Between reality and negation, there is continuity of possible realities and of possible smaller perceptions, that is, between a red object and a non-red object, there is a continuous chain of redness. So, every reality in appearances has intensive magnitude or degree, otherwise perception of the object is not possible. The third one, analogies of experience. Their principle is experience is possible only through the representation of a necessary connection of perceptions. Mere perceptions alone do not contain knowledge. They have to be synthesized or pulled together. Any item of knowledge contains a manifold of perceptions pulled together into one consciousness. This synthetic or pulled together unity is the essential thing in any knowledge of objects of the senses. It is this synthetic unity that distinguishes an experience from mere induction of the senses. Kant describes three analogies. First is that a principle of substance persists in all change of appearance. Second is that the law of causality or cause and effect is applicable to all changes in the world, and third is that everything in space coexist and interact. The fourth one, postulates of empirical thought. Even when there is a clear concept of an external object, three questions can be asked. Are these objects possible, actual and necessary? The postulates of the possibility of things says that a thing is possible only if its concept agrees with the formal conditions of experience. The claim or assumption about the knowledge of things are as actual requires perception, but it does not have to be perception directly of the object whose existence is to be known. What is needed is an actual perception that connects with the object in one of the ways dealt with by the analogies of experience, which define all real connection in experience as such. Whatever is connected with the actual in a way that is required by universal conditions of experience exists as necessary. These four are the principles of pure understanding. Just to repeat, those are axioms of induction, anticipations of perception, analogies of experience, postulates of empirical thought, that is the rule by which the 12 categories of understanding apply to the external world. Now, let us discuss what is the distinction between phenomena and noumena. The distinction between phenomena and noumena is an old concept in philosophy. Generally, phenomena include all that is the subject of sense experience. The external world around us and whatever comes into us through the five senses constitute phenomena. Noumena is different. They are believed to be entities as certain as or even more certain than phenomena. The things about which we have unshakable certainty, but about which we have no sense perception. Noumena includes concepts such as God, soul and the cosmos. The distinction between noumena and phenomena is connected to schematicism and the principles of pure understanding. As stated, the 12 categories of understanding work on sensible inductions to produce knowledge. Kant looks at each category and points out their limitations. The conclusion from limitations is that any external object to be known has to conform to the categories through the schema and must be subjected to principles of their understanding. Those that conform to the categories through schema and are subject to the principles of understanding are phenomena. Everything else, even if they exist, does not fit into human understanding and knowledge. They are noumena. For Kant, phenomena means sensible entities and noumena means intelligible entities. Noumena, he explains, are the things as they are in themselves. They are things thought through mere understanding. Then how is the idea of noumena possible? Kant says that the categories have a wider range than sensible induction does because they think of objects in a perfectly general way without regard to how they may be given. Though we have seen only particular triangles, we have an idea of a perfect triangle. Though we do not have empirical sensations, we have intellectual sensations of noumena. These sensations are illusions, but are very strong and unshakable. Such illusions are unavoidable. They arise from confusing subjective cognitions with cognitions that are from external world. Since there can be no scientific knowledge outside the domain of experience, there can be no scientific knowledge of noumena. Hence, Kant says that metaphysical entities like God, soul and world cannot be known scientifically. They are just illusions, not empirical illusions, but transcendental illusions. They result from transcendental use of categories. The view that the truth of the existence of God, soul, etc. cannot be known is called agnosticism. Kant was thus epistemologically agnostic. However, he admits the existence of God in his ethical thought. The agnosticism made him unpopular among the clergy of Europe. Thus, Kant's ideas on receipt of sensations through space and time, understanding the sensations by use of categories, rules by which the mind knows the external world, etc. are complete. The transcendental dialectic is about the limits of reason. The dialectic exposes what happens when reason goes beyond sensations and tries to explain these ultimate concepts such as God, soul and cosmos. It is about the limitations of pure reason and the limits of scientific knowledge. Kant has explained that all scientific knowledge arises from sensation. Our understanding cannot gain knowledge beyond what is given by the senses, but they have a tendency to go beyond what is given by the senses. Take for example, the judgment, the world must have a beginning in time, or that the world is eternal and has no beginning in time. Where do such judgments come from? Definitely, they do not come from experience. Hence, it is a transcendental judgment. They are not based on experience, but are illusory. But they are transcendental illusions and are different from ordinary illusions. Ordinary illusions like mistaking a rope for a snake or a logical illusion from wrong use of arguments disappears when you have sufficient light or when mistake in the syllogism is exposed. But these transcendental illusions are not so. They do not disappear even if they are exposed. So, pure reason, when it acts without sensations and tries to know things beyond what is given by senses, it results in illusions. Epistemologically, noumena are illusions. The transcendental dialectic, Kant says, is concerned with uncovering the illusion in transcendental judgments. Now, let us see what is transcendental illusion. Transcendental illusions are illusions, but not arising from external sensations. We have sensory illusions like mistaking a rock for a snake, or logical illusions which result in wrong conclusion due to improper syllogism. Sensory illusions or logical illusions cease to exist even when they are exposed, but transcendental illusions do not cease to exist when exposed. Such illusions are unavoidable and attached to human reason unpreventably. They occur when the categories of understanding confuse subjective cognitions with cognitions that are from external world. Such transcendental illusions are produced by the transcendent use of the categories and have their seat in pure reason. Examples of transcendental illusions include ideas of soul, God, etc., about which we have no sense perceptions, but which at the same time are unavoidable. Now, let us see what are paralogisms, antinomies and ideals of pure reason. When reason tries to make judgments about the self, that is rational psychology, the world rational cosmology and God rational theology, what is the end result? Since they are not based on sensations, Kant says that pure reason cannot create any valid judgment on them, but that it will fall into hopeless contradictions and confusions. By transcendental doctrine of method, Kant means the determination of the formal conditions of a complete system of pure reason. Discipline of pure reason. Here Kant says that philosophy cannot be as certain as science, because like maths, it cannot have axioms, demonstrations and definitions. Neither can it be based on synthetic judgments. Hence, pure reason should discipline itself to sensations and avoid going further. Canon of pure reason. Pure reason by itself is powerless and is subject to its own discipline, but Kant says it has a practical use. Ideas of God, soul, free will, etc. have no cognitive use, but they have a practical use. For Kant, the canons of pure reason ask two questions. Does God exist and does a future exist? For the canons of pure reason, these questions appear as what is right or what I ought to do, and secondly, what can I hope for by being right or adhering to my duties. God is proved by moral certainty and not by logical certainty. Now, let us discuss architectonic of pure reason. By architectonic, Kant means the art of constructing a system of knowledge. Without a system, knowledge will just remain an aggregate and will not become science. Reason cannot permit our knowledge to remain in unconnected state. By system, Kant means the unity of various cognitions under one idea. This idea is a concept of the whole in which the content and place of each of its part is predetermined a priori. The schema which originates from the idea provides the base of architectonic unity. Science is not just based on external principles, but should be framed in accordance with the architectonical principles. The idea lies like a germ in our reason and grows. The history of pure reason. History of pure reason is about the different approaches to metaphysics. Kant, by this part of the critique, examines the history of metaphysics and different approaches by different thinkers about noumena. Now, let us summarize this session. Kant's presence was a watershed event in modern philosophy. Modern philosophy since Bacon and Descartes was an attempt to base the medieval ideas of theology on a newly evolving paradigm of science. but Kant made a paradigm shift. Philosophy thenceforth became critical. Though Kant was not an atheist, his assertion that God and soul cannot be known scientifically invited the wrath of clergy. With regard to philosophy of science, Kant was a milestone. His distinction between judgments, those that are scientific and those that are not, resulted in a paradigm shift in the history of philosophy of science. His Copernican revolution placed man at the center of all discourse, and the historical significance and offshoots of this idea is yet to be analyzed. In this session, we discussed Kant's explanation about the difference between things as they are in themselves, that is noumena, and things as they appear to us, that is phenomena. In the transcendental dialectic, Kant argues that noumena cannot be known. Thus, he points to the limits of scientific knowledge and philosophy itself. Now, a few assignments for you to work out. Is Kant an idealist? The second one, is Kant a scientific thinker? The third one, did Kant believe in God and soul? Fourth one, why does Kant say that God, soul and cosmos cannot be proved scientifically? Here are some books for your references. Critique of Pure Reason, Immanuel Kant, translation by N.K. Smith. The History of Western Philosophy, Bertrand Russell. A History of Philosophy, Frank Tilly. The Story of Philosophy, Will Durant. Thank you for watching this session. See you next time. Until then, bye.